When we tune in for a David Benavidez fight, we know exactly what we're going to get. El Monstro is aggressive, on the front foot, walks his man down with fast hands, combination punching, good punch selection. Defensively, we know that he comes up behind that high guard and he likes to pin his man up against the ropes. But in his last fight against Gvozdyk, we saw that he even started to work a little bit of head movement in. And for the longest, we wanted to see this man fight Canelo. But think about his last 3 fights and think about the way that he really stepped up this competition. Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Plant, then he moves up to 175 and fights Gvozdyk. Like, those are all very good names, incredibly good performances. The man's on fire. And at only 27 years old, every time we see him step in the ring, we see him continue to get better. Stepping in against him is going to be David Morrell. Now, the thing about Morrell that's funny is we never talked about him as potentially one of the best in the world at 168 pounds. That conversation was always centered around Canelo because he's got all the belts. And then we started to talk about David Benavidez. That was the fight that we wanted to see. Those were the guys that we really talked about when we were bantering around who was really the best in the world at super middleweight. But David Morrell is an incredibly talented fighter, man. This dude brings the entire package to the table. And it wouldn't surprise me for 1 minute if he went out there and got the victory against David Benavidez. He may be the underdog. He may be the guy that doesn't have the established resume and the names on it and all the kind of pomp and the circumstance and the big glare and the hoopla and the A side of the fight. That doesn't matter. When this dude shows up in the ring, he shows up and he knows exactly how to fight. Think about what he does. He goes out there, he's big, he's tall, he's strong. He can work incredibly crisp, accurate punches. He can stay behind the jab, but he doesn't have to. He can come inside and work that left hand beautifully. He can go to the body. He can go upstairs. Very fast hands. Knows how to throw 2 and 3 punch combinations very well. What I like about his combination punching is how they require completely different defensive movements. He'll throw a right hook to the body and a straight left. It's like that and it's so fast, so crisp. No tell on him. And it requires these different types of movements. And if you don't, you get caught. Then he likes to get inside, push people around. One of the things that you could say works either for him or against him, depending on your view. When he goes out there and throws punches, he throws punches to hurt people. Some people would say, hey, I'd love to see him change the speed up sometimes. I'd love to see him use some punches to set people up. Other guys are like, he doesn't really have to do that. He goes out there and he's so accurate, he's so crisp, he's got such good punch selection that he wants to put mustard on every shot that he's putting out there because he knows that there's a high probability that it's going to land and it's going to do some damage when it does. All that being said, we know that Morrell doesn't possess the resume that David Benavidez has. I mean, it is what it is. Eventually, you have to get out there and eventually you have to fight these big fights. I commend the man for moving up to 175 and I commend the man for getting this fight with David Benavidez. Because the person that comes out with the victory on this fight, you gotta hope that he's going to get the fight against Beterbiev. And the only way that you wouldn't want to see this man get the fight against Beterbiev is if you wanted to see him get the fight against Bivol. That's the only, because both of those dudes are 1 and 1A in the division right now. And the winner of this fight is going to be in the conversation. We're going to have to see what he brings to the table. But as much praise as I can heap on both of these men for everything that they do well, there are some things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on in this fight. Now, when I look at David Benavidez, the first thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the work rate and the stamina. When he was at 168, man, he was a powerhouse as far as that was concerned. But we've only seen him at one time at 175. And in that fight, he started to tire a little bit, started to slow down towards the end of it. And if he doesn't have the work rate, if he doesn't have the stamina, if he doesn't have the ability to keep coming forward and pressing, I think it's going to make a major difference to his game. And when you're talking about stepping in there against a guy like Morrell, if all of a sudden you start to slow down around the 9th, 10th round, man, it could get ugly and you could all of a sudden get steamrolled. Okay, that's not even talking about what would happen if you were talking about fighting against Bivol. If you were going in there and fighting against Beterbiev, there's some people at 175 who can do some real damage. You are going to have to stay strong, fit, and be well conditioned throughout the course of this fight. And one of the things that nobody talks about is how your stamina takes a hit when you move up. Okay, everybody likes to mention the fact that you no longer have to make a drastic cut. And if you're no longer making that big cut, all of a sudden that means that you got all this energy and you can do all these things and it's great for you. And I totally understand that logic. That's why guys move up. That cut becomes too drastic. It takes too much out of them. They can't fully recuperate. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is now what you're stepping into that fight, you also have more weight that you're carrying around. Your body, your lungs, your heart, everything isn't used to carrying around that extra weight for the course of 12 rounds. Go look back at fights. When guys move up in their career, they typically get fatigued early on when they move up. That's what we saw from David Benavidez in his last fight. So I'm going to be looking at the work rate. I'm going to be looking at the stamina. Second thing I'm going to be looking at is the defense, okay? He can't just go in there and just walk through these guys at 175, man. They can crack. I need to see him show more defensive movement, more defensive technique, more defensive responsibility than we've seen from him in the past. Okay, I need to see a tighter defensive guard. I need to see some defensive feints. I need to see you move your feet a little bit more, man. Get some more head movement in there or something. Don't just right now when we think about David Benavidez, we know exactly where he's going to be. He's going to be right in front of his guy, and we know where his hands are going to be. They're going to be up high. They can get brought down when people go to the body. They can work around the gloves. There's lots of things that creative, talented fighters with hard punching and fast hands can do. David Benavidez is going to have to step up his defensive game if he's going to be the best in the world at 175. I also want to see how he handles Morrell being a southpaw. We've seen him in against southpaws before. Wasn't exactly his best performances. This will be the most talented southpaw that he's ever going to be in the ring against. That's not exactly going to be easy. So I want to see how that's going to look on fight night. And when we're talking about David Morrell, defensively, I want to see how he's going to handle things. When we saw him in there with his last fight against Kalajic, let's be honest, man, he was getting caught with a lot of shots, okay? Kalajic was figuring out a way to punch in between Morrell's punches, and he was getting hit with a lot of right hands, and he was getting hit with a lot of short jabs when they were at like middle distance. He's not going to be able to eat those shots against a puncher. The other thing that I want to see is how he's going to handle with the pressure and the aggressiveness that Benavidez brings. Because both of these guys like to come forward. Ideally, they both want to be in a situation where they're coming forward and they're applying pressure. They can't both do that. One man is going to have to start to use lateral movement. One man's going to have to back up. One man's going to have to give ground. They're not just going to sit in the middle of the ring and fight in a phone booth. I think the man that starts to do something different is going to be Morrell. And I don't think it's because he doesn't want to stand there. I don't think it's because he's scared of what Benavidez brings to the table. I think it's because that's more a part of his game. He's got the footwork and he's got the technique to be able to do that. So I think that he will. So he's going to start to use a little bit more lateral movement. He'll start to back up a little bit more. Look, he's got the IQ to make all of it work. He's got the IQ to be able to land counter shots, to take away the jab, to be able to move around, to do all kinds of things. But how is he going to be able to do it against David Benavidez? That's the question. Is he still going to be as effective? He's going to be able to handle that pressure. He's going to be able to use the jab in a way that keeps the distance and slows Benavidez down. Like, there's a lot of things going on there, and we've seen him be able to go in there basically and steamroll everybody that he's been in there against. He's not going to be able to steamroll David Benavidez. We've seen David Benavidez go in there and fight in his last 3 fights. Those are better fighters than anybody Morrell stepped in against. And we saw the way that David Benavidez handled it. So in that sense, I've got more questions about the way in which David Morrell is going to be able to handle a world-class fighter. So either way, long story short, man, really looking forward to this one. It's going to be an amazing fight. We already see dudes getting heated. They're talking crazy to each other in this first press conference. So that's going to be the whole back and forth. We're talking about David Benavidez wants to break his mouth. We see David Morrell over there saying things that apparently can't even be translated in different. So it's going to be a good one, man. It's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a good card. Really looking forward to what both of these men bring. Super excited that they were both willing to make this fight happen. And it seemed to happen very easily. We didn't hear about many negotiations going on for very long. Wasn't a lot of back and forth. Boom, all of a sudden both these guys make it happen. So awesome win for the fans. Let me know what you guys think. How do you think this one's going to look? Who's going to come out with it? And who do you want to see the winner step in there against next? Let me know.